Welcome back to Rare Game Room Gaming. Today we're stepping up to the plate to take a swing at one of the most iconic baseball games to ever hit the original Nintendo. Bases Loaded. Now, this wasn't just another sports title tossed out in the late 80s. This game changed the way baseball was presented on home consoles. It kicked off an entire series, introduced a brand new perspective to the field, and even influenced the way later sports games were made. And before we get too far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our classic game history videos. And be sure to drop a comment below. Tell us your memories of this one, or what game you'd like to see us cover next.
野球ゲーム初の音声合成で球場での興奮にそのままにファミコン燃えろプロ野球振り返ると
So, Bases Loaded first hit Japan in 1987 under the name Moero, Pro Yakyu, which roughly translates to burn, Pro Baseball. Pretty intense name, right? It was developed by Tose, one of those ghost developers who work behind the scenes on tons of games, often uncredited. And it was published by Jaleco, a company that was starting to make a name for itself in sports and arcade titles. When Bases Loaded made its way to North America in 1988, it instantly stood out. Believe it or not, it was only the third baseball game released for the original Nintendo at the time, so it was a pretty big deal.
If you think you've played in-your-face basketball before, wait until you shoot some hoops from Jaleco. You'll run and gun, jam and slam in the fastest schoolyard game in town. Here's action so real, you'll see it come to life right before your eyes. Hoops, and for exciting baseball, swing for the fences with Bases Loaded, both for the...
What really made Bases Loaded special was the camera. Instead of showing the field from above or behind the batter, it flipped the script, putting the camera behind the pitcher. That angle gave the game a totally fresh cinematic feel, almost like you were watching a broadcast. For 1988, that was a big leap forward, but not everyone loved it. Some players found it tough to judge where the ball was going because of that viewpoint. Still, the gameplay was deeper than most sports games of the era. You could control pitch types, curve speed, even switch pitchers mid-game. You could also make slight adjustments after releasing the ball, something rarely seen at the time. Of course, it had its flaws. The outfield visibility wasn't great, and fielding could feel sluggish. But back in the day, this was a serious step up in baseball simulation. Now, this game didn't just stop with one release. Bases Loaded went on to become a full-blown franchise. The original Nintendo got 4 games total: Bases Loaded 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then, Jaleco took things into the 16-bit era with Super Bases Loaded, Super Bases Loaded 2, and Super Bases Loaded 3 for the Super Nintendo. They even brought it to the Game Boy. And later on, to the PlayStation and Sega Saturn with Bases Loaded 96, doubleheader. In Japan, the series stayed strong under its Moro branding, spawning arcade versions like Moro, Pro Yakyu Home Run, and Jitsuryoku. Pro Yakyu. Those weren't direct ports of the NES game, but they carried the same DNA, Jaleco's vision of cinematic baseball. So, how well did it do? Pretty darn good. Bases Loaded sold around 1.58 million copies, which is a huge number for a baseball game in the late 80s. That success proved people wanted more realistic sports games. Jaleco saw that. And that's why the series kept coming back year after year, all the way until the mid-1990s. It also set the tone for future console baseball titles, games that went for realism, player stats, and that broadcast-style feel. Without Bases Loaded, it's safe to say sports games might have taken a lot longer to evolve into what we have now. Let's talk about the people behind the curtain. Tose, the developer, was, and still is, one of Japan's most secretive studios. They've worked on hundreds of games without being publicly credited, including work for Nintendo, Capcom, and Bandai. For Bases Loaded, key staff included designer Nobukazu Ota, programmer Tetsuji Tanaka, and composers Koji Murata and Akihito Hayashi. And Jaleco wasn't just about baseball. In Japan, they ran an entire sports lineup under the Muero name: basketball, tennis, soccer, even hockey. So, Bases Loaded was their breakout hit internationally, but it was part of a much bigger sports brand at home. If you compare Bases Loaded to its competition, it's fascinating. Games like Nintendo's baseball were extremely simple. Just hit, pitch, and pray. Bases Loaded added more realism, more strategy, and that unique behind-the-pitcher angle. Now, most people remember RBI baseball as the big name from the NES days, but some retro gamers actually prefer Bases Loaded. They felt it was a better simulation, even if RBI had real MLB players. And when you fast forward to modern times, that presentation style we take for granted in games like MLB, The Show, or Super Mega Baseball. You can trace a lot of that cinematic camera work straight back to Bases Loaded. When Bases Loaded launched, critics were mixed but mostly positive. Players loved the graphics, the smooth animation, and the feeling that it was more real than previous baseball titles. However, some reviewers back in the day, like those from Computer Gaming World, didn't love the camera angle. They compared it unfavorably to Hardball on other systems, saying it made hitting harder than it needed to be. But fans didn't seem to mind. The game became a hit and built a loyal following. Even now, some modern retro reviews call it a solid sports sim that deserves more recognition than it gets. So, yeah, while it wasn't perfect, it had heart. And it hit a home run with plenty of players. So, why should anyone care about a baseball game from 1988? Because Bases Loaded represents a turning point in how sports games were made. It wasn't just about hitting a ball anymore. It was about presentation, realism, and immersion. It built a bridge between the simple 8-bit sports titles and the deeper sports simulations that would dominate the 16 and 32-bit eras. It's also just a fun reminder of how far video games have come, from these humble beginnings to today's ultra-detailed sports franchises. And that wraps up our look at the history of Bases Loaded for the original Nintendo. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, please hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It really helps the channel grow and keeps us bringing you more classic gaming history. Now, it's your turn. What are your memories of Bases Loaded? Did you have a favorite team? And what other games do you want us to cover next? Let's talk about it in the comments. If you're already subscribed, thank you so much for supporting Rare Game Room Gaming. And if not, click that profile picture right here to join the crew. And before you go, click one of the videos on your screen to keep the nostalgia rolling. Thanks for watching.